So, thank you everybody for joining us for our Creative Placemaking Leadership webinar. Uh, this session is on community coaching, a new way to speak truth to power. My name is Leonardo Vasquez. You can call me Leo. I'm the Executive Director of the National Consortium for Creative Placemaking. What we're going to be talking about today is a tool that we use to build capacity, and in communities to not only do plans but also to help build the leadership capacity for people in communities to be more effective stewards of creative placemaking. So let me tell you a little bit about the National Consortium for Creative Placemaking. We are now we're in our 6th year of existence, and our focus is on building capacity, community, and connections to help grow the field of creative placemaking. And we do that through a variety of methods. You might be familiar with our Creative Placemaking Leadership Summits, as well as the Certificate in Creative Placemaking program that we do in partnership with New Hampshire Institute of Art. We also do workshops and webinars, and we also work in communities by providing technical assistance, of which community coaching is one form. We also do strategy labs as well as contract consulting. And then we also do a lot of thought leadership work by going around talking about quality creative placemaking. Speaking of which, let's talk about what that is. Now, creative placemaking, in short, is about enhancing quality of life, economic opportunities, and cultural development through the strategic and integrated use of arts and culture in these social and economic issues. That kind of shorthand description can speak to anything from murals to cultural districts to children's arts programs. So what are the elements of quality creative placemaking? What makes creative placemaking good? How do you know good creative placemaking when you see it? Well, at NCCP, we look at 6 pillars. And I'm going to go from the clockwise, from the 12 o'clock position. Quality of life. Does the work that you do with arts and culture, local culture, enhance quality of life for as many people as possible? Not just those people who enjoy arts and local cultural activities, but especially those people who aren't participating. Are they benefiting in some way from your work? Economic opportunity. This speaks to economic development, but it's also about personal economic opportunities for more jobs, for entrepreneurship, for enhancing for enhancing standards of living within the community, and again, for as many people as possible. Shared leadership. Nobody can do everything. Everybody can do something. And shared leadership and collaboration is about sharing the risk, sharing the reward, sharing the credit, sharing the blame. Some of you may be nodding right now. I can tell you it sounds good, but it is a lot harder than it looks. And in fact, in community coaching, that's what we spend probably the most time on. Freedom and belonging. To what extent do our interventions in the community, our work, enhance the sense of freedom to be whoever you are and feel welcome in the community, and belonging, to help people feel that their community is part of them, just as they are part of the community. Now, there are 2 orientations we look at. An asset-based orientation is the idea that we build on what we have. Now, this means that we look at the creativity that exists, the creative assets, and rather than just focus on what's missing, we start with what do we have and how can we work with what's there to enhance it. And a place-based orientation is the idea that we build on the best qualities of place. You may have heard the term placekeeping. Well, this is what a place-based orientation is. Now, it doesn't mean that we that communities are museum pieces and that we just try to fix it in a certain point in time. Now, even if we tried to do it, it could never happen. Communities just change organically, but we can be intentional about preserving and protecting the best qualities of that place, not just the buildings, as preservationists do, but also in the cultural elements. So this is what we look at, and now let's talk about the process of change in communities. In order to achieve lasting, sustainable change, we have to affect how people think about where they live, work, and play, and what they do in these places. So on the left, you see that what we try to do is, in order to have lasting change, first we try to make people aware. What is a problem? What are opportunities? One of the things that I've been a planner for more than 20 years, and one of the challenges that I face, and maybe some of you have faced this challenge as well, is that people think that whatever's there has to be there. So one of my favorite tactics, actually, for changing how people are awareness is something like a parklet, where you take a parking space and turn it into a stage, a lawn, whatever. The idea that people see it and say, "Oh wow, that space that I always thought was just meant for a car can be something else." And a parklet is also experiential. It's not, you don't just look at it, you go into it. You have some kind of experience that affects your awareness and affects your beliefs about what could happen, which, as you guide people and as you work with them, as you coach with them, can affect their behaviors, which then also has an impact on their expectations about the world, or about their community. If they've been if they're in a situation where they feel like, well, nothing's ever going to change, and they see some change, well, slowly that can impact their expectations. Behaviors that are practiced over and over again become habits, and people are habitual. We do the same things. We may not be aware of all of our habits, but that's how we are. And then, so when we take all those together, then that affects the culture in the community, because our culture is basically our shared beliefs and shared behaviors within a place. Now, this all sounds like you could just sort of go down the boxes, and I know, I probably put it in a very simplistic way by putting it in this table. It is very difficult. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't, one activity, one event does not move the needle very far, but it helps to move the needle. So let me just take a look here to see if there are any questions here. Okay, we got people from New Hampshire all the way to Hollywood, to West Hollywood. Hey, I used to live in LA, so I'm familiar with West Hollywood and love Buffalo, Elmwood Village. Anyway, I digress. So let me tell you about our program, about community coaching. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm an urban plan. I've been an urban planner, and I've done the usual, urban planning career of going through doing parks and economic development, community development, etc. I've never been a transportation planner, but of course worked with them. And I always struggled with the idea of why is it that some communities are so successful at achieving lasting change while other communities simply aren't. And I realized it's not about the project. It's not about the territorial assets. There's uh, you know my friends in the new urbanism world, in the the TOD, that's transit oriented development world, look at uh, transit, you know, transit as basically being the center of gravity that's going to change communities. And yes, it does in some places, but there's also plenty of places that have good transit and are not doing well. So I thought about, okay, well, that's where I got into this whole idea of it's not about the things, it's about the people, it's about their people's relationships with their place and how they think about the cognitive and the behavioral elements. So knowing that these things don't change just because of one or two events uh, or projects, how do we lead to lasting change? That's where we came up with the community coaching program. Now, what this is a 6 to 9 month engagement with a community. What we do is, and when I say a community, it can be, we've worked in as small as a neighborhood within a city to a 5 county, or in Louisiana, they're called parishes, a 5 parish region. But the sense is that it has to be a felt community, that, there's something that connects those pieces, the people there as part of a place. Now, what we do is we work with our clients, and the client can be a municipality, a nonprofit organization, anybody who's a catalyst for this work. We help them build a group of people, at least 12, sometimes it's been as big as 50, and they have to be a group that represents the diversity of interests in the community. Now, when I say diversity, I don't mean just racial, ethnic, cultural diversity, but also civic. We want business people there. We have to have at least one working artist and at least one elected or sometimes a high-ranking public official. We know, anybody who does creative placemaking work with the arts know that you don't wait till the end to work with the artist. It's actually kind of insulting to them to do that. Um, the best work comes when you bring the artists in at the design stage. Similarly, with the reason we want to have elected, ideally, or public officials at a minimum, is that you don't want a group that's going to just come up with a lot of ideas that have nowhere to go. You want that group to be influential. Now, you'll notice that the image there is of a spiral, not a circle. Now, why we do that is we recognize that everybody wants to get the right people on board, but you don't know who the right people are from the beginning. You never have all the right people in place. You could be meeting for years and years and still not have all the right people. So what we always ask in our work is, who else should be here? Who haven't we heard from? Who else can contribute? And why would they want to contribute? What's the benefit to them? And what we find in community coaching is that, yes, we start with often start with that same small group of people who participate in everything. But when we think in terms of a spiral instead of a circle and recognize that the team is really never complete, then that opens us up to reaching out to others. Now, ultimately, what happens is there's usually about 8 or 10 people who wind up being kind of the center of the group. They are the core leaders, so to speak. Um, but you don't know who those 8 or 10 people are at the beginning. Now, some people say, "Oh yeah, I know. It's the people who show up to everything." Yeah, maybe, but there's also people who, through this process, will elevate their own leadership ability to take on greater roles. And you don't know who they are because maybe they haven't felt invited before. They may haven't felt well, or they may not have felt the courage to do that. And community coaching does do that. So how we approach it is, is 1.5 to 2.5 hours every 3 to 4 weeks. Why this? Because we find that if you meet more often than 3 weeks, people get burned out pretty quickly. If you go if you have their meetings last beyond 4 weeks, then people lose their momentum. People lose their focus, just like I lost my focus just briefly there. So this is kind of an intense process for about 6 to 9 months. And yes, you do lose people from the team, but then you bring, there's other people who join. And even if you lose people, those other people who don't stay on the team will at least remain to help support the work. 1.5 to 2.5 hours, what we found is really, good because shorter, you don't really have the time for people to engage in really meaningful conversations. You could talk about projects in 30 minutes, but in terms of the meaningful conversations about what is going on, why are things the way they are, who's benefiting from the way things are, who's not, what are the challenges to change, those really deep questions, you're not going to get those in 15, 20 minutes. It takes time. More than 2.5 hours, people just get tired after a while. There's only so much energy, mind space that people can put into this kind of work. I mean, I could talk about it all day long, but uh, other people don't. So what we do is mostly it's dialoguing, and we approach it as let me just take a step back here. Um, the way most people approach a project or community engagement activity or community realization is to say, what do we want to do? We don't start there. That's maybe a conversation that begins maybe in the third or fourth month. We focus on what do we want to achieve and what are the values, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. Let's understand it at a deep level. If something's a great idea, why hasn't it been done before? It's probably not that nobody ever thought of it, but there was something that prevented from happening. Now, at this point, some of you may be thinking, oh yeah, okay, that's kind of really fluffy, new agey stuff. Let me tell you, yes, we get deep, but we're also very practical. Uh, we talk about what other cities, what other communities have done. Uh, when people ask, well, what should we do? I will talk about here's how this place approached that place approached. What we won't do as coaches, and this is a key distinction from a consulting relationship, is we don't provide uh, solutions to the clients. We help them develop solutions. We help them understand it. but the ideas and the decisions have to come from the team. Our work elevates the creativity that exists within the team. We also don't tell them what priority they should, when they made choices, what priority those choices should take, because they're going to be working on it. It's up to them to decide, what do we do now? What should we plan for in the next year? What should be a long-term project? The reason we do this is that I found most of my work is prior to this has been in consulting, planning consulting, is that you give some people a good idea, and they say, or even a bad idea, let's say, and they might nod their heads and take it, except but then when it doesn't work, they go, that consulting, what the heck, But when people are challenged to come up with their own ideas, they're going to be more creative. It's not just going to be yes or no. They're going to think about it more, and they're going to have a stronger connection to it. People tend to nurture what they create. So if it's their idea and it doesn't work, they're going to probably spend more time thinking about how do we make it work, or was I completely wrong? Let me take a look here to see if there's any questions. What do you call one of these groups you build? We call them creative teams. Now I'm using the word group and team very strategically. A team is a group of people that have a shared mission and shared values. They may not always get along. They don't always agree with one another, but they have ways of working with each other, a way of doing things that are considered part of the team. For example, simple things like if everybody expects the meeting to start on time, that's a team. That's a team culture, that the meetings start on time. Other types of teams, the meetings start, when everybody gets there. But they also have a shared mission. They agree that they're trying to achieve the same thing. A group is a collection of people who happen to be together for some period of time. So community coaching is about helping a diverse group of people become a creative team. Okay. So thank you, Chrissy, for that question. And just to let you know that this is a program that we've been doing for 7 years now, and it's gotten some significant recognition. One of our plans not our plan. We facilitate the development of the plan. A plan that we helped to develop for Perth Amboy won the 2016 Outstanding Plan Award from the New Jersey American Planning Association, and then there's been also other recognitions. But more than the recognitions are the I'll get to the accomplishments soon. I do most of the coaching, and I tend to do the coaching in a community within 2 hours of Newark, New Jersey, because we're based in Union, New Jersey, which is outside of Newark. But we also are able to offer this program with outside of the area. We will train coaches from our graduates of our certificate program. Sorry, that's a typo there, or actually it's old information. At the New Hampshire Institute of Art now, not Ohio State. So where have we done this work? We've been in 10 communities in Louisiana, and as you can see, there's neighborhoods of Baton Rouge and New Orleans, as well as the Southwest Louisiana region, which I mentioned earlier is a 5-parish area. And in New Jersey, we've worked in a number of towns, as well as the Monmouth County coastal region, which many of you is the northern part of the Jersey Shore. Okay, let me see. There's a question here from Nathaniel Potter. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Are these leaders representing other groups? Are there ways in which you make these regularly scheduled meetings accessible to folks who might have certain barriers? The people on the team, when I'm asked who should be in the group, I say people who can help make things stop, people who can help make things go in the community. And typically, these are people who are involved in other types of activities. They may not necessarily be there representing a particular agency, but they have connections to different communities within the larger place. Some of them may be informal leaders. In some towns, you have people who are known as sort of like the mayors of the block. So, but the idea is that we want to make sure that they are that the group itself is diverse. And as I mentioned before, if we find that we're missing a representation, then we say, okay, who do we know who's part of this community, part of this interest group, and how do we reach out to them, and why would they want to participate? Are there ways in which you make the regularly scheduled meetings accessible to folks who also might have certain barriers? We give the group a lot of agency, so we say, where should we meet? And typically, we want to meet, if it's possible, in a central setting with ideally somewhere that's near transportation, public transportation, and preferably somewhere that's ADA accessible. And what we find is that in many communities there are places like that. It might be the basement of a religious institution. It might be a room in a performing arts center, but we try to make it as accessible as possible, and also in terms of time, we try to. Most people are working, are involved in daytime activities, so our sessions, coaching sessions, tend to be in the early evenings. Sometimes, especially in Glassboro, New Jersey, where we worked, it was always a kind of a potluck dinner. So we did the session as kind of almost like a community dinner, which was really nice. But again, this comes from understanding the place and working with the group and saying, okay, what's the best way to bring people together, and also in a way, where do we do it and at what times, and how do we do it in a way that everybody who participates will feel comfortable, will feel that they have that they are valued in the same way as whether they are executives in their organizations or they're people who are civic volunteers. So thank you for that question. Now, let's get into some of our, let's see, there's another one here. Do you allocate funding from your budgets to compensate people for their time or other needs that will allow them to participate? We don't. I know that's an issue, especially when you're working in lower income communities. We don't pay people to be part of the team. We hope that the organizations they're a part of will sponsor them or give them the time to be involved. So, but I know that in community development, there is that is an issue of you're asking people in the community to give up their, and not to give up their time, but to give time to an effort, and should they be compensated for it? My own personal sense is that the compensation, there's a long term compensation that people who are involved in these programs get, which is the enhancement of their communities. The consultants get a short term compensation, which is for the time they're spending, but they're not getting the long term compensation unless they work in the, unless they live in the community itself. But I certainly understand that sense of people being asked and asked and asked to be part of something, and especially when that something doesn't lead to, or doesn't seem to lead to, uh, benefits. Um, but anyway, I am digressing, and I just bring that up because I know it is an important uh, question. So and please don't feel sorry about asking. I mean, that's part of what this is about, is that you ask. So um, the so question from Chrissy: how are you typically engaged for these projects by municipal planning department? So yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that at the end if you don't mind. And if I forget to answer it, please remind me. So just some of the sample accomplishments, just to give you a sense, this has created new projects, new arts councils, uh, the the uh, greater visibility of arts in the community than before. Because when you think about how do you know when a place is, let's say every place is creative, but we think about places that are centers of creativity. Uh, how do you know? How do you know them when you see them? Well, because you see more art, you see more cultural activities, and so uh, you know this work inspires groups to do more. Now, you'll see on our screen there, Monroe, West Monroe, that's Louisiana. For those of you who are fans of Duck Dynasty, they are based in West Monroe. These are two towns uh, that are both share and are divided by a river. They had each of them had their own riverfront downtowns, and for a long time they just didn't, for whatever reason, I don't know why, didn't do a whole lot with one another. And so community coaching, we first started in Monroe, Louisiana, and using that spiral idea, who else should be here? Folks from West Monroe were invited, and the process of people being engaged over 6 months led to the idea that, hey, wait a second, we should be working together. That is just makes so much sense. And they addressed what happened was there had been a habits, a culture of not working together. And I'm going to use um, the Silicon Valley cliche of saying, by disrupting that thinking, it allowed for new ideas, allowed for new behaviors, which is helping to shape a new culture in that part of Louisiana. So, why does this work? Well, again, I'm going to go back to disrupting or disruption. Is people get used to doing things a certain way. They have, you know, they tend to get overwhelmed by the tyranny of custom. Doing things a certain way because that's the way we've always done them. So the coaching helps people to think, okay, well, wait a second, why are we doing this, and why aren't we doing things differently, and who's benefiting, who's not, who's not, and that's where people think, oh, the new agey, stuff. That's where the deep conversation takes place. I mean, a lot of my work as a coach is about asking questions, a lot of why questions. Uh, why is this the way it is? Why hasn't it changed? Why didn't, if it's a great idea, why hasn't it been done before? 6 to 9 months takes time for people to build trust. Trust is the glue of any team. And when people get together the first time, yes, they're going to be nice to each other. They know what they're supposed to do. That doesn't mean they trust one another. It just means they know how to, for the most part, act like, you know, act in a civil manner. But over 6 to 9 months, as people kind of learn about one another and see that they have a lot of the same interest and can start working on projects with one another and feel that they can rely on each other, that they have care for each other or their communities, that helps to build the trust. Every community I've worked in, they say, oh, we're in silos. People, get busy. They just stick to other people that they've talked to regularly. People who basically just agree with them. This happens in big cities. This happens in small towns. It happens in neighborhoods. That's just the way we are. We are just so busy doing things. It's just easier to be around people who think like us, or who we know what they're going to say, even if they don't think like us. And then what we find, and this is with the development of the arts councils, is that people want to continue the team. And in several cases, they continue the team by either being part of the Arts Council, or in the case of places like Perth Amboy or Glassboro, New Jersey, actually creating new arts councils to continue that work. So I'm going to take a sip here while you go through these statistics. This was work we did in 2013, 14, I think it was. And actually, this was a bit of a surprise. Now, we knew that we could build, effective plans, good plans from this work. What we didn't realize is what kind of psychological impact this had on the individuals who are participating. So these were people who, in the case of Louisiana, the state offered each community a $3,000 grant, seed grant, if they successfully completed their community coaching. And all 10 of the communities did successfully complete it. Now, people may have come in for that seed money, but they sure didn't stay for it, because it is a lot of work. And, there's easier ways to raise that amount of money. They stayed, and this is a survey of more than 200 people who participated in the program. As you can see, they stayed because it helped them understand, it helped them feel more confident, get a better understanding of how arts and culture can enhance communities, and their own confidence in their leadership ability. So there was a question, I think the question of fees. As I mentioned, New Jersey, we charge, because we're subsidized in part by the New Jersey State Council of the Arts and Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation. Our fees range from $6,500 to $40,000. What you see, if you read the Perth Amboy Creative Placemaking Plan, that's a $40,000 project. The plans that you might see from Hackensack and Glassboro are more the basic. And then, as I said, we can do it a lot of places in the United States. But outside of New Jersey itself, if you're within 2 hours, we do charge a little bit more, because we're not funded by anybody outside of New Jersey to do this work. Now, the question is, how are you typically engaged by these projects? It really depends. In the case of 3 times, our work has been supported by NEA Our Town grants. In Glassboro, it was a developer who provided the initial funding for our work. In Hackensack, it was the Main Street organization. In Louisiana, it was the State Office of Cultural Development. So there's a lot of different ways. What I would recommend is, if you're interested in this, is maybe talking to a local community foundation or a bank. Banks have what are known as CRA offices, Community Reinvestment Act offices, where they're expected to spend money to enhance community revitalization in communities. And typically a bank could offer a small amount of money, let's say $6,000 or so. But as I said, if you have a developer who's very interested in the arts, this is a way to go. And for a developer or for a Main Street organization, what this does is it reduces the risk associated with creative placemaking, because no matter what level of work we do, we're going to produce something that provides a sense of focus and direction. I realize that I've been talking so much, and I did answer some of your questions, but I can now open up for the next 15 minutes, I can open up the microphones and just take your questions. So if you do have background noise, please mute yourself so that you're not interfering with anybody who is trying to ask a question. I've unmuted everybody, so if anybody wants to ask a question, that's fine. If you don't have a microphone, or maybe your voice is a little hoarse, you're welcome to type in your question in the chat box. I've got the chat box open. So, questions, comments, thoughts, and by the way, it's okay to say, hey, I've been doing some of this myself. Yeah, that's great. If you're doing coaching with communities, that's terrific. In fact, I like the idea of planners, particularly urban planners, being coaches as much as they are consultants, because being a coach really changes the relationship with your client. You're not simply a vendor. You're not simply a set of hired hands. You're somebody who's being asked to, or who's being expected to teach and to guide. So, comments, questions? Should I be nervous that nobody's asking anything? Yes.
Hello.
Hi, Cheryl.
Yeah, this is going to be Mary Jo. Hi.
Whoops, I think you've got an echo going on there, Cheryl. Okay.
Okay, so should I go ahead and speak?
Go ahead.
Okay, could you talk a little bit about how in your practice you have integrated the 4 pillars of sustainability from the United Nations?
The pillars of sustainability from the United Nations. Okay. Oh, there's still a second.
Okay, sorry. I'll mute.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say I don't intentionally do that. I am part of this. I've practiced sustainability, studied. I'm part of Sustainable Jersey. I'm not intimately familiar with the UN's pillars of sustainability, but I've never seen a definition of sustainability that really differs much from, everybody who works in sustainability in communities seems to, have similar ideas about the fact that we have to think holistically. We have to be focused not just on environmental protection, but as enhancing quality of life for people as they define their quality of life, not as we define it, and ensuring that there's a greater economic opportunity for people as well. Some people call it the 3 E's: equity, economy, environment. In Sustainable Jersey, they use the term 3 P's: planet, prosperity, people. We're talking about the same thing. So I'm not answering your question directly, but I hope I hope that the work that we do, what I've shown, is in line with the 4 pillars from the UN. But thank you for that question. Any other thoughts? Did you answer Chrissy's question? I thought I did answer Chrissy's question about how to engage. Does a toolkit or outline of the community process exist, or have you considered creating one? We do have a toolkit that we developed for ourselves, and it's not public. It is a proprietary program, but I'm happy to share, like I said, share some of this work. If we do get funded if somebody wants to fund us to produce a toolkit, we'd be happy to do that. Now, I will say that there are a lot of toolkits out there for creative placemaking. So not so much about the coaching side, but one day I do hope to write a book about it. But now is not the right time, but at some point later. Okay, so let's see. Chrissy's taking some notes and shared them with us. Okay, great. Thank you, Chrissy. I appreciate that. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. I hear somebody enjoying their lunch there, I guess. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Okay. And from Sonia, plan to do the certification program in September. How soon after could I be ready for community coaching? Really, once you graduate, which would be in June, you would then be prepared to be trained as a coach and to be coached as a coach. So the training itself is it would be a one-day training, and then the coach will be supporting you through your first coaching assignment. Alejandra, hi Alejandra, how are you? From Bloomington, Minnesota. So will the PowerPoint be available for viewing at a later time? Yeah, I will make the PowerPoint available upon request. I don't want to jam up anybody's email boxes, so you want to just send it to me. And the collective says thank you, and thank you to the collective. I'm sorry, that's just a really cool name for an organization. Okay, any other thoughts and questions, comments? No? Okay. Well, I guess this would be a good time to close up, and so I want to thank you all again, and please be on the lookout. We do have some really exciting programs coming up. Tomorrow we start our Creative Placemaking Leadership Summit in Albuquerque. The next summit after that will be in April in Columbia, South Carolina. And we also have workshops and webinars. Just go to our website, cpcommunities.org, and you can find out more information there. So, thank you, everyone. I am going to shut, let's see, unless there's another comment. Okay, I'm going to shut things down now. So thank you, everybody. Bye.